Here we go. This is the second part of the question of, is it better to let 100 criminals go free than to imprison one innocent man? The question basically of, are criminal defense attorneys doing the right thing by using the process to let a criminal free?
What bothers me about this phrase, and why it's always been a bit of a pet peeve of mine, is because I feel as if some attorneys, like Alan Dershowitz, quote this as a justification to say that they are wearing a super cape and protecting American society by serving the role they serve in as criminal defense attorneys, and that they're basically protecting the American people from tyranny. And in that context, what they're essentially saying is that it's better that he's helping stop you from having an improper search of your car without probable cause by getting this person off. So we have the same case 100 different times. So every single time here, for one reason, it makes it through the trial court. When it goes through appeal, we're going to let each of these people go, right? And we're going to say, this guy has to go, this guy has to go, one by one, all 100 of them. And that when we're letting these 100 people go, that now sends a message to the state that they say to them, hey, stop doing illegal searches of vehicles, because all you're going to end up doing is letting all of these criminals walk. You're not helping yourself. If your objective is to convict these criminals, you're only making it that much harder on yourselves, and therefore you're disincentivizing an otherwise tyrannical government from engaging in tyranny. And that's how
policy basis, right?
That's how I always understood this statement, based on hearing people like Alan Dershowitz use it to justify his role in the criminal defense and saying, look, I'm stopping America from police from looking in the trunk of your car by getting this serial rapist off. And that's basically how he puts on a cape that, don't look at me like I'm a bad person just because they end up going out and killing or harming other people. I'm helping America by what I'm doing. That's the only logical way that I can see to interpret his statements. And I hear that, and to me, I'm like, no, I don't think that's true. That's the part I disagree with.
I mean, I would phrase it differently than Dershowitz does. I wouldn't say me getting my clients, evidence excluded because of a bad warrant or whatever the case might be, saves you from getting your car searched. But that is the underlying public policy behind excluding that kind of evidence. My position is more akin to, listen, I'm going to fight like hell for my client and compel the state to prove them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt before they can put my client in a cage, because you want that burden too. And if the guy I'm defending today doesn't have that protection, the people you love and you don't have that level of protection.
Ultimately, I think Dershowitz,
it's not the person's acquittal, the bad guy's acquittal, that's the benefit. It's the process. It's not the outcome. It's the process. The outcome is incidental to the process. If you have good process for the worst of us, you have good process for the best of us. And I care a lot more about the process than I do about the particular outcome in any individual case.
Oh, I'll agree with that one.
Okay.
I would too. Dershowitz is right. There are, policy objectives, and there are things that do benefit society overall. But while you're fighting for that person, that's all else is secondary. It's about getting them the process and getting them the true, justice they're entitled to. If that helps everybody else, that's great. But even if it doesn't, that's your job as that guy in front of you. That's your world. That's your objective.
It is more important that the innocent be protected than it is that the guilt be punished. For guilt and crimes are so frequent in this world that they cannot all be punished.
But if innocence itself is brought to the bar and condemned, perhaps to die, then the citizen will say, whether I do good or whether I do evil is immaterial, for innocence itself is no protection. And if such an idea as that were to take hold in the mind of the citizen, that would be the end of security whatsoever.
Sure. If there's no justice in the system, why subject yourself to the authority of the system?
Interesting.
Because I think the point that he's making here is that if the state is to recklessly punish innocent people, you're basically creating chaos, because you're telling your citizens there's no benefit in following the law. Even if you're innocent, you may end up in prison just the same as if you commit the crime. So you might as well commit crimes, because your innocence is not going to protect you from serving time in prison.
If you read Stolitzin, they talk about, you listen every night and you hear the feet thump up the stairs and you hope they don't kick in your door.
Because I did look at it as an opportunity for the likes of Dershowitz to put on a cape and say, no, I'm doing a benefit to society because I am stopping tyranny from taking root in the form of our government. And that if I don't get this guy to go free because there was an illegal search of his trunk, tomorrow there'll be an illegal search of your trunk. And I don't buy that. And the reason I don't
I think more
that,
specifically, he's saying if I don't get this evidence excluded, the client could still be convicted. I mean, just because you're getting evidence excluded doesn't necessarily preclude. Those are two different things.
So I'll tell you why that bothers me, because I don't think it's any individual case that is keeping the government in check from acting with tyranny. You cannot tell me that if he wins on this motion or if he loses on this motion, it's going to have any impact. This one case will have any impact on the level of tyranny that we're going to feel from our government.
No, but it does. It undermines the aggregate, Joe. To the extent there are exceptions to the rule, then the people who are committing these wrongful acts become incentivized. Yep. They don't care about which particular case it happened.
So these decisions, these one-offs, have massive policy consequences in how police are trained to conduct investigations, to conduct searches, to conduct interrogations. They see one opinion and they change their entire policy around it.
Yeah, and this is how police are trained. If you've ever seen the police training for legal matters, I mean, they like one case is taken in complete isolation from the greater body of the law, and they're taught that this is the magic rule that entitles you to do X, Y, and Z. And that's all they know. I mean, these are just cops. They're not lawyers. They're not legal theorists. They're just police officers, and they follow that training.
Like Branca said, it's horrible when these, the police just grab onto the law like that and say, okay, well, I guess we can't do that now. And they don't think, well, wow, we did that wrong. What else are we doing wrong? They just say, okay, well, that part isn't allowed anymore. And they move on to the rest of it and assume it's okay.
But if there was one exception, if there was one exception, I don't think it would change how it's the overall aggregate of cases that the government keeps losing. That means that even if one time they manage to somehow sneak one by,
the government doesn't lose though, Joe. Most of the time they win. Most of the time they get upheld. Yes, that'd be great if they were getting their ass kicked, but dude, they run the table. Oh, it's all harmless error.
Why is that? Why is that? Because objectively, 99 times out of 100, when you have this improper evidence at the trial court level, it's being excluded. It's not making it. It's not making it into those cases. Am I wrong? Am I wrong about that? That you tell me. Is it such a common thing? Maybe I don't practice criminal defense. You guys tell me. Is it such a common thing for someone to illegally search a trunk?
Yes.
Yes.
And it never gets overturned. It never gets overturned. Except for the one exception case. And if you look at Virginia Court of Appeals, Virginia Supreme Court law, the number of cases that get overturned on evidentiary grounds, you're talking 1 out of 10,000. It is amazing the odds that people go up against. And yes, in trial courts, evidence goes in that could 100% and should 100% never be seen by a jury. But the Court of Appeals always says it was harmless error.
Right,
they
harmless error.
Yeah.
Right, that's the point I was going to make. It's not just that an error was made, right? The appellate court might concede this evidence was permitted incorrectly, but it's an error that has to matter, that would have made a difference. Right. And whether or not it would have made a difference is a human subject call that's being made by the appellate courts. No one knows with any degree of absolute certainty if the jury would have come back with a different verdict but for this error. But they make a judgment call. They say, nope, the verdict would have been the same, still would have been guilty. So while there was error, it was harmless, affirmed.
Sorry to steal your thunder here, but you all just proved my point. I'll tell you how. My point is that when Alan Dershowitz gets up there on his soapbox and says, I'm preserving America by going through this process and getting this, and ultimately, I understand it's all about the process, but that we see the countless times that there are screw-ups in the system, and not any one of them is having an impact on how our government is acting. Ergo, when Dershowitz succeeds in getting this maniac off, no one case is actually having an impact on how our government is operating. Accordingly, He is not a hero. He is simply serving ultimately to unleash a maniacal weapon in the middle of society and say, here, society, you deal with it. That is what happens when Dershowitz succeeds. He's not a hero. He's actually harming America. You just proved my point.
No.
Wait, I did not prove your point.
Pull up Adams's quote, because there was a point that you made when you pulled that quote up. You made the point, when the government recklessly prosecutes, then they disincentivize the innocent people to the point where essentially there is no more justice. You said where they recklessly use that power. Who tells them when it was reckless? It's the attorneys who tell them when it's reckless. It's the lawyers who are defending these cases who say, this is the bullshit you pulled. The lawyers are the ones that hold the government's feet accountable.
I don't see that here in the quote, brother.
It was your statement. You said,
because I think the point that he's making here is that if the state is to recklessly punish innocent people, you're basically creating chaos, because you're telling your citizens there's no benefit in following the law. Even if you're innocent, you may end up in prison just the same as if you commit the crime. So you might as well commit crimes, because your innocence is not going to protect you from serving time in prison. This is the quote right here. It's here. Okay, so tell me where there's the recklessness of
the question that I had in that very moment was, you said the word recklessly use that power. Who tells them? Who sets that standard? It's the lawyers that call them on the bullshit. The lawyers that call them on the bullshit are the ones that say what you just did was reckless use of that power. And here's how you did it.
Because who else would do it? Right? The legislature can't do it. I mean, not in any way that's practically useful.
And if I don't tell the jury and show them why the government was reckless in using the power, nobody ever stops.
Ultimately, would you agree with me, though, that it's the aggregate of cases which is what's influencing our judiciary rather than any one particular case?
It can be one case. It can
Joe, a flood is built of many raindrops. I mean, each one is important.
Ooh.
I think you guys proved me right, but that's just my take on it. You guys can disagree, but I think that when you say that it happened so many times, so if it happened one more time, it's not going to change what the government's doing. But I understand the process, the importance of the process. I agree with you guys. The importance of the process is very, very important. It is very important. And you can make the point that, like, okay, so if I'm going to criticize any one of them, then I'm ultimately criticizing all of them. And that doesn't make any sense, because I'm on the same page as you, that we need that government held in check. And the only people who hold in check is these attorneys. Maybe it's better if we don't look at them as being heroes, but just they're doing their job. And maybe I'll give more of a pass on that, given the fact that we do need the aggregate of criminal defense attorneys, such as yourselves, holding their feet to the fire. Otherwise, indeed, if we didn't have any of you guys doing this, in that case, the government would be running roughshod over all of us.
I'm out of order. You're out of order. This whole podcast is out of order.
Awesome.